From tradition to technology. This is a study of animation and film from its roots to its modern successor. I'm John Ross Porter, and this is my presentation submission for my analysis paper. So, animation. What exactly is animation? Animation could be considered to be any sequential series of images that are intended to portray a narrative. But overall, the actual definition is more circumstantial to the intent of its creators. In this regard, I will consider animation to largely consist of any artificial moving content that is not naturally filmable. And with that in mind, animation has 5 types it can be classified into. Traditional, which consists of hand-drawn sequences that are organized frame by frame. 2D, which is often depicted through Flash, used as software that organizes images into layers and movable models that are rendered digitally. Motion graphics, digital sequences used for the purpose of advertising for products or company logos. 3D, including computer-generated images or CGI, fully digital sequences or effects rendered in simulated 3D space. And stop motion, a form of animation that uses physical models that are sequenced shot by shot to simulate motion when played back. For the purpose of this analysis, I will be focusing on traditional and 3D animation. Traditional animation's historical inception in film is often credited to the House of Mouse studio, also known as Disney, and their 1937 feature-length release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Its production started sometime in late 1934 or in early 1935, when visionary Walt Disney pitched the story to his team of animators under his employment. His proposal to animate a feature-length film was unheard of at the time in the world of animation, as most studios typically created 10 to 50-minute shorts. Disney wanted to push the animation industry into a new direction. He wanted to compete with the other live-action features that had dominated the box office sales at the time, and was determined to succeed even at the risk of his own company. Snow White introduced new methods to animators, and by its release, achieved Disney's vision of what would soon push traditional animation into the spotlight of the film industry, which also founded the pedestal to success that would turn the Disney company into the giant it is today. So with traditional animation's history, where does 3D animation make its debut? What started in the early 60s as simple 3D graphics that was used by an airline manufacturing company employee became the first renderings of what would explode into the world of computer-generated images and effects. Early uses of this new CGI technology in the mid-70s found its home in a selection of live-action movies, one of particular note being Lucasfilm's space opera, Star Wars. In the animation world with our friends at Disney, 3D animation was first used alongside its traditional counterpart in the 1985 feature, The Black Cauldron, where the majority of its usage was in special effects for a magical sword, the Black Cauldron itself, and a light orb that followed the main characters. 3D animation would further benefit from the advancing computing industry as it continued its push into the animation genre of film. With the introduction of 3D animation came with it a slew of innovation and further merging as a tool for traditional animation. So, where exactly did 3D animation first have a foothold with traditional animation? Well, it largely came into the field as a huge time-saving device in big feature productions. 3D animation was used for its ability to quickly process a number of sequences that would have been initially hand-drawn frame by frame, that potentially doubled the resulting animations in half the time. Additionally, with the ever-evolving software used in 3D animation, the possibilities of being able to render complex objects and move them along a sequence became a valuable asset. Animators could then spend time on other aspects of the production. But with 3D animation dominating the film genre, does this mean the extinction of traditional animation? Not necessarily, but looking at the advantages 3D animation brings to the table, it could be easy to consider such a notion. In addition to undertaking complex objects and sequences, CGI offers the ability to create an entirely realistic sense of animation. When it's used correctly, that is. But even with the many perks of CGI, the skills and techniques used in the days of traditional animation still find use in the silicon-based 3D technology. When it comes to faces in CGI, the ability to make expressions realistic can become quite the challenge. But through looking back at the process traditional animators took when it came to bringing faces to life, 3D animation tossed in the same method, albeit in its own modern way. Rather than forming a facial structure from nothing but base polygons, CGI integrated essentially the same 2D plane traditionally used for reference into a 3D space that mapped out facial features, allowing for more realistic and easier manipulation for animators. So while not as prevalent as it once was, traditional animation still proves to be a reliable source of techniques still being implemented by the 3D-dominated animation industry. History, innovation, and the present usage. It's time to discuss some challenges, starting with traditional animation. What's the difference between the animation of a bouncing ball and the high-impact fight scene between two characters? Besides the obvious, it really comes down to depth. Depth is the concept within animation that provides the context and follow-through to the narrative each animation is trying to convey. Typically, the bigger the narrative is, more detail is required to accurately depict the message, and therefore, the more time it will take to do so. Looking back at the production of Disney's Snow White and the new introductions the film made to the animation world, the animators had the challenge of designing characters that demanded more detail to fit the narrative Walt Disney envisioned. The task as a whole led animators to study examples of realistic human emotions to better portray the likeness on screen. Additionally, actual human models were used in costume as stand-in examples for the animators to work off of. Overall, these new methods, undertaken by traditional animators in the face of new challenges, skyrocketed the principles of animation to new heights through the following years to come. Moving on to the challenges faced by 3D animation, it's immediately hindered by the very thing that brought it to popularity: technology. Easily described in concept, 3D animation can become technical very fast. As much as traditional animation relies on the artistic skills of the team of animators, so too does 3D animation rely heavily on an equally skilled team. Working with computers can be difficult to the inept user, but it becomes almost an impossibility when 3D animation software gets involved. Not all software is the same, neither are the users who are familiar with the program. This poses a big potential challenge to the animation studio who has a team that lacks the knowledge of the software used for their next production. Additionally, the skills required to effectively utilize the animation software may be out of reach to smaller budget productions. Maximizing the effectiveness of the team could call for certain employees to be hired at the expense of a smaller team. Finally, there's the cost in general. Technology has historically never been cheap to begin with, and this is even more apparent with the demands of running a 3D animation studio. Technology typically advances every 4 years. This means that for the studio to meet the requirements for newer software, they need to drop a whole load of cash and upgrades to their computer systems, which is no small expense in the slightest. Whether dealing with the depth of animation or the cost of being competitive in 3D animation, each comes with their own set of challenges. So, what's the state of animation we see today? As it has been since the beginning, creativity is the driving force of animation. It's no easy feat to take the visual concept from the mind and put it to a physical medium, and the success of which thrives in animated features time and time again. The modern age brings more opportunity as well. The education in animation has grown exponentially since 3D animation came about, leaving room for plenty of newcomers to enter into the industry that was once only for the pencil-to-paper artists of the time. 3D animation lies dominant in the genre today, and like its predecessor of traditional animation, 3D has its fair share of critics and traditional loyalists. All mediums are subject to review, and animation is no different. But even with a reduction of traditional features over time, and the annual release of 3D features, every success is still a win for the genre as a whole, and only further carries its legacy Disney helped create decades ago. So the question remains, what lies ahead for animation? Well, for one, there's the promise of new technology, and with it, new possibilities. The past few years in computer technology have improved the standard by almost double the productivity of last generation, and with it came new ways to improve the realism of what can be shown on screen. What's great about the technology moving forward as it's improved is the inclusiveness it brings. Not everyone can take up traditional animation, but a lot more people can learn how to use software. Animation is popular all over the world, and rightfully so. Certainly a testament to how much an opportunity it can be to people. But does this encroaching future of growth leave traditional animation in history? I don't think it will. For one, Japan makes fantastic use of traditional styles even today, not to mention the thriving online community of animators. Though it may not ever reach the same majesty it once held, traditional animation can still be found and will always have a place in modern animation. Thanks for being here. This concludes my presentation.